since we arrived in office, I have engaged with the top leadership of all of the large tech companies, all of the people that want to develop data centers. And we've just discussed about how we can get power quickly for them and how we can do it without driving up electricity prices for Americans. In fact, I think they're going to be great catalysts to stop the price rises we've been suffering and ultimately to push down electricity prices. But yeah, tremendous interest from the large developers. They know what needs to be done and they're willing to do it.
Is the administration looking into any way to force their participation? Are you going to say you can't build data centers at all if you don't participate in the power generation or offsetting the costs?
It isn't a matter of force. They want to develop a data center, so they've got to do whatever conditions are required to get permits and to be able to build a data center. But I would say that our relationships and negotiations with them have been extremely productive. They understand the need that we need to stop rising electricity prices on Americans. They get it. They want to build the data centers. Electricity is a cost item for them, but it's nowhere near their biggest cost item. They're willing to do what's necessary to get the right answer for Americans.
And then I believe Secretary Burgum touched on this, but how are you deciding which companies would be taking place in this? Are we only talking about hyperscalers, or are other developers going to be involved too?
All developers. Everyone that wants to bring a new large load. We're going to see large manufacturing plants. We're going to see a giant aluminum smelter come to the United States. We're going to see large scale manufacturing. So it's not just data centers that are going to bring new electricity load to the country. We're going to see a lot of it. And that's, of course, exactly what we want to see. We want to see America reindustrialize. We want to see jobs and opportunity. And so everyone is involved in that dialogue about how do we grow our capacity to allow this reindustrialization.
So off of that, how soon can these power plants actually get online?
Well, we've got shovels in the ground and plants under construction now. But you're right, it takes a few years to build a power plant. So we have to both have the right plan for the new plants that'll come online, and we're doing everything we can to get uprates. You know, a 900 megawatt plant, how do we get a gigawatt out of it? How do we get 10% more power out of it? Whether that's a hydro plant, a coal plant, a natural gas plant, there's actually creative things that can be done there. And again, the Biden administration's overly restrictive regulations say this plant can only run at this rate, can only produce this much power, you can't use that stuff only a few hours a month. So we can get rid of a lot of nonsense regulations to free power from the existing grid. That's the President Trump's return of common sense.
So, but does this plan do any of that? Because some analysts are skeptical that it doesn't fix those problems, these obstacles that you're talking about for actually building plants, in particular gas plants, like turbine, labor shortages, permitting hurdles. Does this plan do any of that?
Well, this plan doesn't specifically address that, but everything the administration is doing is addressing that. Oh my gosh, we've worked with all the suppliers of the equipment you've talked about there to expedite permitting for them to expand capacity of their manufacturing plants. The United States will produce 3 times more gas turbines next year than we produced 2 years ago. That's a change in leadership. Under President Biden, very hard to get permitted to do anything. And bureaucracy just prevented this stuff from happening. That's why industry was leaving America. But a change of regulatory and climate, a change of business attitude is allowing us to pivot. You're right, supply chain needs to grow. A lot of changes need to be made.
This is, of course, a very political issue that the affordability is really coming to define what we're talking about as we head into the midterms. Can you detail what guardrails there are to protect consumers from holding the bag here? And as alluded to in one of the questions about reliability, if there's going to be blackouts, what are those guardrails that American consumers can look for when it comes to this plan?
Yeah, this is regulatory reform that we're driving. We were on a pathway. We did our own electricity study of our grid, that 5 years from now, we would have 100 times more blackouts than we had a year ago. This battleship has been racing the wrong direction. So we're doing everything we can to establish reliability as critical again, affordability as critical again. But again, all of this can be done, but it does take some time. Gasoline prices, for example, they're the lowest they've been in years. That's a market where our actions can change things quicker. Electricity markets are a little bit trickier, but we're going to see tremendously positive results. You're right, it's political season now. I see the Democrats on the news all the time saying we're driving up electricity prices. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth, and we'll bring more and more data out on that. If you have restrictive anti-energy policies, as so many of the states do in our country, That's where prices are rising the fastest. Pro-development, pro-energy states, they have flat energy prices. We want to serve all Americans in all 50 states, but we got to deal with state regulators as well.
I know I only have 1 minute left, but since I heard you answer a question on Venezuela, is the U.S. government considering any type of exchange of Venezuelan heavy for U.S. light to get to the right grade to put into the SPR?
Of course, we want to fill the SPR. Yes, we're going to continue. Our refineries use both light crudes and heavy crudes. So yeah, if you bring more crude into the United States, even if it's a different kind that's in our SPR, does that help fill our SPR? Absolutely it does. More crude on the market.